go live. That'll hopefully do its thing. You're live, it says. Well, that's good. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Behind the Scenes of AV Rant, episode number 663. This is our live recording session. Therefore, it is not completed. There is a completed video version that goes up later in the week. Yeah. Hopefully cleaned up audio. That's the main thing about the completed version. Seeing the pictures these days, so that's not too bad. And then show notes with time links for each individual question are what show up in the completed version. So that's what you'll want to look out for. You've now been warned that this is the behind-the-scenes version. I think that's it. Tom can start when he pleases.
I'm going to please in a second.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Oh, I saw Men in Black International.
Okay. You're not going to talk about it on the actual podcast? Okay.
I just want to delete these emails so that they won't bother me while I'm... Because it's just all garbage. Here we go.
Sounds good.
Oh, we only reached 85% of our bandwidth this month. Look at
12 gigs or whatever we're doing for a purely text website.
I know. It's a lot of bold, I think. It's got to be bold.
Well, we made it.
We like the italics.
We're on to a new month, so we made it.
We made it. Look at that. Look at us. I should have gone in the other room and done the Eco Bee. I should have put on shorts. Is what I should have done. All right. What time at the stamp are we at? 2 minutes. All right, here we go. Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Andry, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AV Rant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. Let's see what's been interesting. Spider-Man's back in the MCU because Disney and Sony both decided that they both like money. So good for them. And
I just boycotted that entire discussion. I have to be honest with you.
That was silly.
When everybody was like, "Oh, Tom Holland is tweeting," I'm like, you tell me somebody's tweeting about something, I no longer care what they have to say.
He unfollowed Sony Pictures on Twitter after they kicked him out of the MCU.
Sick burn,
Now
bro.
he's back in. So that was fun. And then, let's see, I watched most of the new television pilots that premiered last week. And the only one I think I'll keep is Evil on CBS. One of them channels. It was good. I was very pleasantly surprised by that one. I like it a lot. Check out Evil.
So I started watching Blind Spot.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is an older show. It might be canceled by now.
No,
probably.
There's one more season. I think this is the final season coming up this year.
Yeah, I felt a lot about that. Like I watch shows thinking, okay, will my wife like this?
Correct. Okay.
That's how I kind of watch stuff because I need to find stuff I can watch with her. Now she likes stuff like Person of Interest, White Collar.
Okay.
She's watched all of Community.
Okay.
Even the terrible episodes that happened after Donald Glover left. We're watching Superstore or Supermarket, whatever that's called, and Veronica Mars.
Yep.
So that's the kind of stuff she likes.
Okay.
If anybody out there is like, I want to suggest something for your wife, that's the sort of stuff her Person of Interest and White Collar were her two favorite shows so far out of all that.
Maybe Suits. Suits is wrapping up.
I tried. I tried Suits once. It did not. We'll try again. I'll try that one again. The first couple of episodes, either she didn't like them or it didn't just click. But she immediately fell in love with Veronica Mars. But Veronica Mars is just complicated enough that keeps her interest, but not so complicated that I can't tell her what's going on.
And they somehow managed to keep bringing that show back. It's like it ended a long time ago, and then they made a movie that was like funded on Kickstarter, and then now they're bringing back another season. So go
I started watching Blind Spot thinking that would be it, but that's a lot like Alias. Like the first season of Alias, you're like, man, this show is so awesome, and then all of a sudden you're like, and now everybody who was good is bad, everybody's bad is good, and remember all those plot lines? We're not going to wrap any of that crap up. We're just going to go on, and that's the way I feel like Blind Spot is getting. It's getting so complicated that I can't follow it, and I'm like, no.
I enjoyed in Blind Spot how eventually not only did the writers realize that Ashley Johnson's character of Patterson is like pretty much the most important character. They just started having the characters on the show being like, yeah, Patterson's the most important one out of all of us, and she's pretty much the show now. So if we ever want to get ratings, we'll just put her in jeopardy because we don't care about anybody else.
Right. So, yeah. And I still, you know what? They kind of built up the main male character as being like, Bruce Willis and everything or whatever. Like oh, you're that guy. Somebody said that on the very first episode. Oh, you're that guy. You're such and such. And then he's like, yeah, whatever. That dude gets his butt kicked by everybody. I'm like, I saw a politician kick that guy's butt on this show. I mean, yeah, he eventually won, but it's like, who is he supposed to be? Somebody special? He's no special. He's just bald with bad teeth. Anyways, all right. So I guess English. Sorry. So
the actor is
he really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Look at that. I just Sherlock Holmes it out of his bad teeth and lack of hair. I don't know why that even makes him English, but whatever. This is AV Rant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask us by emailing us at question@avrant.com. Go to www.avrant.com and leave us a comment there. Facebook.com/AVRant podcast, where we monitor that quite easily because Facebook will not let us not do it because it tells us all the time. YouTube.com/AVRant is where our videos are, both behind the scenes and cleaned up versions. So you can watch the same podcast twice. 2 hours, 4 hours of your
I'm quite
week.
certain many people do, because I don't think we have unique viewers between the two versions.
You must.
I don't think so. I think those are.
Or they fall asleep during the first
repeats.
one. They fall asleep during the first one, and then it just keeps playing. Auto plays through the second one. Like, oh, you like that first one? You're going to like this one even better. Okay, you can contact us directly. It's Rob at AVRant.com. His Twitter's at First Reflect. I'm Tom at AVRant.com. My Twitter's at AVRant_Tom. I'm going to thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, all you have to do is support us in some way. One of the ways you can do that is going to www.avrant.com. Click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link. This is in the top right corner-ish there. For now, until we get our new website from one of our listeners who's going to build us one. Where are you? You have not contacted me yet. Tom at avrant.com. I really don't want to do another website. Yeah. I've done like the last 5.
I certainly will. I've never done one, and I'm not taking that on.
It is a nightmare. It's not that bad, really, but it's just, So I want to thank David, who left us a PayPal donation through our website. So thank you very much, David.
Yeah, David, thank you for that PayPal donation. It's appreciated.
And we want to thank our 86 patrons over at patreon.com/AVRant Podcast. Patreon's a service where you can sign up for a monthly subscription to your content creators of choice. So if you like what somebody's doing, you can give them $1 a month or infinity dollars a month. But last month we had 88. This month last week we had 88. This week we have 86. And Rob thinks it's because we insulted high-res audio last week.
We insulted high-res audio. We insulted CinemaScope 2.35:1 screens. And I'm like,
I did that. Well, yeah, for sure.
Yep.
Yeah,
I recommended the Apple TV 4K, and to Apple haters, they're like, why didn't you mention every other streaming box that exists at the same time?
My favorite one was like, how come you never recommend the NVIDIA Shield?
Yes.
I'm like, holy crap, dude.
Yes.
Welcome to the podcast.
Well,
first of all, welcome to the podcast. This must be the first one you've listened to because every other episode had the NVIDIA Shield in there someplace. But it happens. You can't. Yeah. I mean, it's okay, guys, I hate to say it. If I'm going to do this podcast, I'm going to tell the truth. And there's objective truth and there's opinion. Some people call it subjective truth, but it's not. There's objective truth and subjective truth.
Well, there's honesty. Opinion, you can be honest about an opinion without it necessarily being factual. But
I just read an article that was an opinion article, like, how to upgrade your home theater, to have a mind-blowing home theater, and it was I don't quite understand.
Was that the one that was like the $700 projector and a sound bar?
There was that. Screen? Well, it had okay. Well, there was one that had a laser engine projector, and they said it only had to be 2 inches off the wall, which I think it meant could be 2 inches off the back wall.
No, it might be one of those ultra short throw projectors. It could be the case.
I don't know. It could be. But whatever. They didn't suggest a screen. They did suggest, I think, 2 or 3 sound bars. Yeah. And then a router, maybe? It was some sort of strange thing. It was the stupidest article I've ever. I'm like, well, and then when you suggest Bang & Olufsen right next to Klipsch, the cognitive dissonance.
I can just see the numbers of our Patreons going down.
I've been to Bang & Olufsen. I like those guys. I like Klipsch too. I don't like articles that are basically money grabs. And that's all it is. It's like, okay, who wants to be in our article? Pay us, and we'll put you in our article. And that's exactly how that article happens. That's how it happens.
Well, we will just answer your questions honestly. We are most definitely not a money grab.
Oh, yeah, because our hands would be itty bitty tiny baby hands.
That's right.
For the first time ever, we've got Violet in the room with us, my new puppy. She has settled down.
Good.
She has learned many things, including, how to walk properly on the leash and go outside the bathroom, mostly. She's also learned that she can play with me really roughly, and I'm all scratched up. So that's okay, too. Let's get to the news here. Along with the enormous $2,500, 250-pound dual 15-inch Monolith subwoofer, I like this subwoofer.
Oh, yeah.
I
wouldn't want to try to move it very often, but yes.
I like this type of subwoofer. And it's for the same reason I like the cylinders. I like this thing. It's tall and it's as small as you can possibly make it. So it's got a small footprint.
It is still about 2 feet deep, so I don't know if I would call that small.
That's small for a
dual 15-incher.
Dual 15-inch drivers. Remember when SBS was making dual driver subwoofers back before they sold out to whomever they sold out to? That ended up
large ottomans.
Yes, they were large coffee tables. Yeah. They were large everything. So, anyways, dual 15-inch Monolith subwoofer that Monolith Price unveiled at CEDIA. They also completed their THX speaker lineup by unveiling their Monolith THX tower. They're huge, nearly 5 feet tall, and naturally they're meant to be paired with their own Monolith amps. So they're in 4-ohm design with massive power handling. There are 2 versions, $850 each for the standard model, $1,000 each for a version with a built-in upward firing Atmos speaker. Wow, that's $150 very poorly spent, and they'll ship in November. So yes,
there you go. They are a large design. The tweeter mid-range stack is like in the middle of this speaker, and then there are 2 more woofers above that. So it is a tall tower. That is not an inconsequential speaker going on there.
I'm going to probably say something that might be slight. This is more opinion than fact in my case on this one. I feel that when I see a THX certification on a speaker, it's slightly less than worthless.
Well, I don't know. To me, it's the low end part of the speaker.
Yeah, it just basically says we can play cleanly within 2 or 3 dB or whatever it is down to 80 hertz. I'm like,
right, but you also get the slope that you're looking for to work properly with a THX crossover in a receiver.
Right.
Yeah, because the whole notion of the crossover is that it's supposed to be the combination of the electrical crossover in the receiver with the acoustical crossover in the speaker should combine to form a 4th order 24 decibel per octave slope. So if you don't have the 12 decibel per octave slope built into the speaker, then you don't necessarily get that. You might get a steeper or shallower slope. So that much I like.
Yeah, I feel like, though, most of the time, it's like having the seatbelt association certified that your car has seatbelts. It's like, I kind of figure they do these days.
Yes.
I kind of assume that they're there. I mean, because all of them have them. And that's the way I feel like speakers with THX. I think THX certification and other things has a little bit more merit. But here, I don't know, for speakers, I always feel like it's like a lowest common denominator.
Speakers, I'd almost say it's more valuable because I know what the low-end roll-off will be. And by the way, if anyone's looking at the image, there is a large circular port at the bottom on the front of this tower. And to turn it into the proper THX tuning, they include a port plug. So you actually plug the port on this speaker to give it the THX tuning. You unplug it to just use it by itself, basically.
Right. So that basically the speaker manufacturer said, we want to have it extend to here. And they're like, and THX is like, yeah, you can't do that.
Yeah. Well, they're like, a tower that big, there are going to be people who want to use it without a subwoofer. Even though we would never recommend doing so, there will be people who want to do that. And they're like, yeah, you can do that with the port, but you plug that port to turn it into THX mode.
So the CTA, Consumer Technology Association, did some market testing. They've at the request of the ATSC, the Advanced Television Systems Committee, they've introduced an official consumer-facing name and logo for ATSC 3.0 Next Gen TV. who did they ask? because I'm looking at this like I'm in this all the time. This is the first I've heard about this crap. But okay.
Yeah, they don't want to call it ATSC 3.0 anymore. It is now officially Next Gen TV.
I used to read Next Gen magazine when I think the PlayStation was new. They had the Sega Genesis, the PlayStation, the 3DO.
Yep.
They had like Next Gen gaming magazine.
Yeah, it's only Next Gen until the next Gen comes out. So, Next Gen TV.
All right, the logo will appear on 4K TVs with built-in ATSC 3.0 tuners, as well as set-top boxes and portable devices that can accept and decode ATSC 3.0 signals. Next-gen TV broadcasts are scheduled to begin in the top 40 U.S. TV markets by the end of 2020. Dude,
they kind of took the Wi-Fi.
Wisconsin.
They kind of took the Wi-Fi symbol and just like flopped it over on its side at the end of that logo, is what that looks like to me. But anyway, there's a logo. It's officially called Next Gen TV.
Yeah, I don't think this is going to be helpful for anybody. It does absolutely look like it's wireless.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Because it does, but whatever. I guess that's supposed to be the antenna coming from the place.
Something like that.
Good. So at Facebook's Oculus Connect conference, they announced new features that make the popular $400 Oculus Quest standalone VR headset even more attractive. Oculus Link will let you connect the Quest headset to your PC so that you can play the most graphically intensive VR games. It does mean attaching a physical cable, but it's a single USB-C cable, and now the Quest can pull double duty. They're also giving it hand tracking, making the controllers unnecessary for many tasks in some games. That's from Leap Motion. I'm pretty sure I saw Leap Motion doing that.
It's a similar idea, yep.
Yeah, I think they may have partnered, but whatever. And they're improving the real-world video pass-through for when you leave the play area but keep the headset on. Okay, I don't know what that means, but yay.
Yeah.
Yay for them.
Yeah, because I'm happy that I bought a Quest. This is kind of cool, although it's not great for my pocketbook because it's kind of making me consider making a high-end gaming PC so that I can run the most intensive VR games and send it to my Quest headset. Now, the super-duper VR fans will point out how the Quest still has a lower refresh rate and not as wide a field of view as the very best VR headsets. But... Okay. The whole attractiveness of the Quest is that you can get the thing and not have a PC at all and still play some pretty darn good VR games with the thing all by itself, powering everything without any wires whatsoever, and that's great. And then if you're like, well, I have this thing, but you know what? I would like to try some of the highest-end VR games. It's like, well, you plug in a single USB-C cable now, and now you can use it. I'm like, that's pretty good. That's a pretty good value proposition, in my opinion.
Seems like a backdoor way to make you buy a gaming PC, but okay.
I like it.
Some comments here. Jack wanted to share an episode of the 20,000 Hertz podcast titled The Compressed History of Mastering, in which they go through the transition from analog to digital. Transition, I said, right? Mm-hmm. From analog to digital, and discuss why dynamic range compression became so ubiquitous. Everybody can blame Oasis.
Oh, we had a couple of people mention this episode in particular, so it seems to be of interest. And by all means, check it out.
Check it out. No, is it good? Did you listen to it?
I did not have time to listen to it. I don't know.
No, I didn't either. I'm sure it's fantastic. It's probably the benchmark by which we should set these things. Bernard on Facebook hasn't been listening to AVRant for about 2 years. He's right in the middle of constructing his custom fireplace niche and entertainment cabinet, so he decided to listen to us again, only to return just as we were ranting about how much we didn't like built-in niches. Mm-hmm. Sorry, dude.
Timing.
He made his large enough to hold an 82-inch TV, and the spot for the center speaker is more than large enough for his SVS Prime Center. He doubts he'll ever upgrade to anything larger. Foreshadowing. So he just found it amusing and ironic that one of the first things he heard from us is how much we hate niches. Hey, man. Okay, so if you're looking at this on the YouTube videos, mm-hmm. It looks like it's stone. It's some tiled or whatever.
Yeah,
it's got the
stone look anyway. Stone tile look on the front.
It's got a fireplace on the bottom, mm-hmm. I think, which is kind of not a real fireplace.
That's got to be an electric fireplace, I would assume. Yeah.
And the center channel is right above it, and there's no little thing specifically built for it. And the TV is got whatever specifically built for it. We all say we're never going to upgrade, and I'm sure you're never going to upgrade. But if you do,
what if modular micro LED displays become popular?
Yeah, where are you going to stick that?
Plaster it over your fireplace.
Well, I mean, he could just probably. I mean, if he built all this himself,
yes.
Well, he could just build a backing for it.
That's right.
Throw some plywood up there, and it'd be fine.
No. I mean, of course, there are times when niches are okay. We're talking in generalities, and we were talking to someone who was having their high-end custom apartment being built for them, and the architect came in and said, "Let's put in a TV niche," and we're like, "But the TV niche is not the right size, and it's off-center." And
right. There were so many things
and it's completely limiting everything that you're doing here. Whereas if you just had a flat wall, you could put your TV and speakers where they ought to be. So that type of thing is what we're getting at. Now, he's building himself after the fact. So
right.
Don't worry, Bernard.
There are
it
some
looks very
differences
nice.
here. I mean, my parents did the same thing. They had like a 36-inch CRT TV, and they built a niche around the whole thing. And I mean, they thought to themselves, they're never going to get it. I mean, it's probably one of the biggest TVs on the market at the time. It was that long ago. It was before HGTV and everything else. It
continues to be one of the deepest.
That's true. Thing was a nightmare to get up the stairs into their bonus room. But, they thought, this is it. I'll never get anything bigger. But then, flat screens came out, 16:9 aspect ratio became the most popular, and they were stuck with this weird niche they had nothing to do with. You could very well live with this for the rest of your life, and it'll be perfect. I will tell you that when I moved into this house, I saw a niche, and I knocked that wall down. So that's what I did. Brian wanted to share that if you were interested in any Cambridge Audio 2-channel gear, they're refreshing their lineup, so the outgoing models are on clearance, including a nice stereo integrated amp, 25 watts by 2, for $100. I like Cambridge Audio fine.
Yeah.
I like Cambridge Audio.
And $100 for a 2-channel amp is pretty good deal no matter what.
Pretty good. Yeah, if all you people look for Atmos.
That's right.
There you go. It is integrated amp, so whatever. It was only 25 watts, but you'll be sitting within 4 feet of it anyway, so who cares? All right, some questions here. Let's get into them. Adam. The last time Adam wrote us, he was asking about getting a slim center speaker and some very unobtrusive surround speakers for his huge, wide open living room. We mentioned JBL Stage Series Slim Center and also suggested KEF, especially their super flat T series for the surrounds, and potentially scoring some brownie points with Adam's wife by using KEF. A KEF speaker bar up front so that all 3 channels would be in one slim enclosure above the fireplace and below his TV. Adam talked it over with his wife, and it turns out she liked having the tower speakers because you never know until you ask.
You never know. That's
Don't
all right.
assume. So we addition to JBL Center and also the slim Polk S35 Center. The Polk was a bit cheaper, and the Polk OWM3s are very convenient, a very convenient form factor for a surround. So we went with those, and he's pretty happy with them. The living room's acoustics aren't likely to ever improve, and volume level is kept low, so things are pretty much settled for this setup, except how can I fix all my problems without changing the room at all? Okay, let's get into it. He's powering the living room 5.1 setup with a Onkyo TX-NR609, which is an older model at this point, no 4K pass-through or Atmos. He never wants more than 5.1 in this living room, but he's gone to the trouble of backing up his Blu-ray connection onto his NAS and using Plex, network attached storage.
That's right.
And using Plex. If he connects his Apple TV 4K directly to a Samsung TV, you can get 4K and HDR from the various streaming services, and ARC can send a basic Dolby Digital 5.1 back to his Onkyo, which is fine since Atmos of no concern to him in the setup, but for his Blu-ray backup, he wants to hear the lossless audio. The native Plex app on the Apple 4K TV 4K won't send out lossless True HD or DTS HD master audio, but the Infuse app can decode True HD or DTS HDMA into lossless 7.1 PCM. Of course, that won't work via ARC, so should you get a new receiver? Would it be worth paying a bit more to get a Denon X3400H with the best version of Odyssey considering its acoustic environment? Any money saved gets put towards the dedicated theater that'll be going in the basement. So huge room bag acoustics, Polk speakers about 13 feet away, but the volume is always low. It's the best balance of price to performance here. I would not care one iota what version of Odyssey you got.
Not in here. It cannot fix that. That is absolutely not the type of thing it can address.
We just talked about it so much last week, but really quick overview. You take multiple measurements within a small area, 2-foot area of your main seating, and it does it says, okay, if I fix one thing, how will it affect everything else? And if everything basically works together, if all the highs are going up and all the lows or the dips are going down, well, it can fix. But if it's not, then it just basically leaves it alone as much as it can. So in a room like this, any version of any room correction is basically just going to go yeah, man, I can't do much with this.
Yeah.
So I would not worry about it. I would get the receiver that had the features that you need as far as pass through and everything else, could power the speakers that you have, which is your 5.1, which is probably your entry level Denon or whatever, and has just your basic room setup. And that's all I would worry about.
Yeah, I mean, I might not go for the very lowest end with, very little amplifier power. If 13 feet away is enough that you might want to have some, at least halfway decent amplifier power. So I would point you to Denon's X2400H, which you can pick up for $320 from Accessories for Less right now. The question of does he need a new receiver at all? I mean, in this setup, honestly, you kind of do, because if you want the lossless audio, you have to connect your source device directly to your AV receiver. And if you do that with your current receiver, there's no way to,
and every other workaround that you would have would just it would cost more than buying a new
exactly, because you'd have to get a
HD Fury,
an HD Fury to separate the HDCP stuff, which would cost almost as much as this new AV receiver. So this is probably the most cost-effective way to do it. You'll be right up to date. You'll have all the new network features and everything to go along with it. So an X2400H.
So he'd like to get an uninterruptible power supply, UPS, for the living room. If the power goes out, he'd like to be able to keep his TV, Apple TV 4K, Wi-Fi mesh device, Lutron lighting bridge, home security hub, and his receiver all running for a while. He figures he would quickly put the receiver in a standby to save battery power, but he'd still like to be able to pass through HMI sources via standby pass-through so that he could still view his security cameras and monitor his network. Sounds like a prepper. The zombies are coming. I want to be able to see them as they come.
Lines, but I can still see them coming. Yep.
My first thought when I started reading this, because this is the first time I've read these questions, is why on God's green earth would you care about having a receiver? But now I kind of understand where he's coming from, but still. But if the receiver is plugged into a battery outlet, even though it would only run off the battery and standby, we'd still say it should be a 15 amp high current battery outlet, right? So which UPS should he get? Does it need to be a pure sine wave model, or is a stepped sine wave okay? I don't know, whatever the kind is that APC sells, the J versions.
The J ones, which are they quote it as a stepped approximation of a sine wave. Totally fine. I've been running all my home theater gear off of a J type APC for well over a decade now, and have I ever noticed that it's not a pure sine wave? There's no way I would ever notice such a thing. So a J type is what you want. Now, I would point you, since you've got this many devices and you actually want to be able to continue using your camera and your network and stuff for some amount of time if the power goes out, it's worth having, a fairly sizable battery that can run all this stuff. And since you want the AV receiver to be on a battery outlet, you're saying that when the power goes out, you'll quickly put it in standby so it's not drawing a ton of current itself off the battery, but it still means that when it is in use, it's in a battery outlet, and you do want the full 15 amps going through. So I would say to get either the J10 or the J15. I mean, normally I recommend the J25 or J35 because those are less expensive, but the J25 and 35 do not have any high current battery outlets, and they have fewer outlets total. So the J10 or the J15 are the way to go. B&H Photo is where I like to send people for APC products. The J10 over there is $465. The J15, which is a bigger battery, that's essentially all it is over the J10. Bigger battery and capable of outputting more wattage from that battery. That's a $530 device. So there you go.
All right. Infinite Gary. Fox Sports announced that its Thursday night football broadcast will be available in 4K with HDR this year, but the cameras are all actually 1080p with HDR. The production team says this allows them to continue using the same production trucks and the ability to offer super slow motion replays. 1080p HDR footage will be upscaled to 4K HDR and HLG for the services that support it, and downscaled to 720 SDR for the regular broadcast. Jay, who's shocked by this. So Gary asks, is this half-baked? It's not. It's all the way baked. It's just not the solution that you thought you were going to get. Will shooting in 1080p and then upscaling to 4K look any better than just sending 1080p to our TVs? No.
Well,
No. I mean,
sometimes their upscaling in a production facility is a little higher end than what's built into your TV, but
I don't think because then you're going to compress it and send it out over the airways anyway. So I would worry more about the compression than anything else. I mean, I think that you can make the argument that if you were tuning into a 720 or 1080p, broadcast that was sent out, that there would, and instead of something that was 4K that they were trying to send out and then compress, the compression, there might be less compression somehow or
different codec
compression artifacts. Yeah. I mean, I don't think any of us really know, but all things being equal, if they upscale it or your TV upscales it, it shouldn't really make a difference. It should look exactly the same. But, Rob has a point. Maybe they have better scalers than you do.
Well, especially if you have a very low-end TV. Some of those still have
but he does
pretty not great scalers. Yeah, if you've got a high-end flagship Sony or LG or something, then upscaling of the 1080p signal would look probably every bit as sharp as whatever upscaling they're doing before sending it out. Yeah.
So what if you don't subscribe to any of the supported 4K services? Will you not see HDR in the wider color? Nope. I mean, I don't see why you would.
And as many people reported, since the last Thursday game was the first one that they did this way, even if you do have one of the supported services, you're not going to see HDR because they screwed it up. So on the first broadcast, if you were watching via DirecTV or Fios, you actually got the 4K HDR in HLG, which is the hybrid log gamma. Right. That's the HDR format. That actually worked for DirecTV and Fios customers, and there was a couple of smaller cable companies where it worked for them as well. Of course, you had to have those cable companies' 4K set-top box, DVR connected to your TV, and your TV had to support HLG, which surprisingly not every single HDR TV does. So there was all of that. But Fox had said that if you have the Fox Sports app and you were using, I think everything other than an Amazon Fire, which ironically the Amazon Fire is the only streaming box that supports HLG. So highly ironic, but an Apple TV 4K, Chromecast, Roku, they said if you had the Fox Sports app, that you should be able to watch this 4K HDR stream. Well, that didn't work for anybody. Nobody was able to watch the 4K HDR stream. Now, over at Forbes, they wrote up about how none of these boxes support HLG, and they surmised that that's the reason this didn't work. However, somebody else said, I figured this should work, so instead of leaving my Apple TV 4K set to 4K resolution output with HDR support, he forced it into 1080p output, and all of a sudden the HDR showed up. So it was as though the streaming services were getting the camera feed, right, without the 4K upscaling, and that worked, at least on an Apple TV 4K, with a forced 1080p output, and then it activated HDR. It was converting the HLG to HDR10.
I'm going to tell you right now, that man was whoever did that was either single or had the world's most forgiving spouse, because my wife absolutely loses her mind when I start futzing with stuff in the middle of a broadcast.
I'm guessing single. That's the type of thing I might try. I mean, it was a bit of a mess. Most people didn't get to see it in HDR. People who were on DirecTV or Fios did, if they had all the equipment. If you were just watching the regular broadcast, or you were on anybody other than DirecTV or Fios, such as Comcast or Dish, well, Dish customers didn't see it at all because they're in a dispute with Fox right now and aren't carrying the channel whatsoever.
Right, they don't let the show Spider-Man either.
And then Comcast, I don't know what was going on there, but whatever it was, lots of people didn't get to see it this way. So they saw the regular broadcast, which would have been 720p standard dynamic range, Gary. Yeah.
So now that we've seen the price points for Samsung's The Wall and Sony's Crystal LED, do we think micro LED displays will ever actually replace OLED? How do we think flat panel displays will advance over the next 10 years? I mean, we've already said it quite a few times, but I think that's the future. I mean, I think we're going to have
modular displays.
Yep. I mean, I honestly think somebody's going to invent a paint that you just paint it.
I don't know about that, but I do think the modular display thing. I mean, look at how prices of tablets, for example, have from the first ones to now how much less expensive they've gotten. I've no question that micro LED technology will continue to advance, become more easily mass produced, and therefore get cheaper. Yeah. And to me, it makes all the sense in the world that instead of actually rolling out these huge pieces of mother glass for LCD and OLED displays, that you just produce one size panel, one size fits all. That should actually allow it to become less expensive more rapidly.
A little 16 by 9.
Right, yeah.
you just keep stacking them.
And then the only hiccup in this whole thing is that if this is the future, modular displays that you put together into whatever size you want, they will have to market and get away from this exact number of pixels thing. Right. But that's fairly easy. We've already done it with all our phones and just talk about pixels per inch, right? That's what we talk about on our phone screens and our tablet screens now. We don't necessarily talk about the total number of pixels. We talk about how many pixels per inch. And they can do the exact same thing. So instead of worrying about 1080p, 4K, 8K, we'll just be like, how many pixels per inch? How many panels do I need? Modules do I need to make the screen size that I want? I really think that's where we'll be in 10 years.
I hope so.
Yeah.
That's where I want to be, honestly. I want the solution to this to be buy a piece of plywood, drill it into your wall, and then put the stuff on it.
Hang the modules on it, yep.
If you don't have a perfectly flat wall.
And think about how much easier that is to ship,
Just everything.
A bunch of modules that you piece together instead of an 85-inch flat panel, right?
And I think when they first come out, they'll all have the same pixel density.
Oh, most likely. Sure.
So if you have a huge wall that you're building, suddenly you're going to have something like 8K or 16K or some variation.
We saw prototype form only, had to be liquid cooled, hidden away, total prototype. But Samsung got this micro LED technology small enough that they made a 4K 75-inch display already this year. Yeah. So absolutely, this is possible on a technical level. It's purely economics, and I think that's where we're going.
I do too. Andy has hired a basement remodeling company to finish his basement. He will have a theater area within the basement room, basement family room, but it's not fully dedicated and enclosed. It won't be dedicated or enclosed. He wants to make all the right choices. Let's start with enclosing that room with his electrician and builder. That's to avoid future headaches. Seriously, enclose the room, though. Like, for real. They said they will have to install a separate electrical panel for the basement should he have a 20-amp circuits installed. Would doing so mean that every outlet in this basement would be 20-amp, or could there only be certain specified outlets? You could. I don't know how big the space is. So the only time you ever really run into 20-amp circuits is if you have some sort of ridiculous power amp that is drawing immense amount of power and to power hugely inefficient speakers.
Well, I think we should make the
very large rooms
distinction here because what we're talking about when we talk about installing a 20-amp circuit for a home theater, say, is a 20-amp but still 115 volt. This is not your 20-amp to 40-volt or 30-amp to 40-volt that you'd use to run your dryer, say, something like that, or your new, plug-in vehicle. This is still a 115, 120-volt service. It's just 20-amp instead of 15-amp. Now, you can run down to Home Depot and get yourself, one of the little electrical cartridges, the fuse box switch, the little breaker switch, and you could swap out any 15-amp 115-volt breaker box that you already have in your electrical panel for a 20-amp 115-volt breaker box.
We do not recommend you do that.
Yes, okay, to cover our behinds, an electrician should do it, but honestly, it's
they have to look at they have to look at the wires. I mean, in order to make sure the wires within the wall can support that.
As long
voltage.
as they're 14.2 Romex, you are fine. But you
should be fine. Yeah.
In any case, yes, you should have an electrician look at it. That is the proper way to do it. But it's dead simple. So there is nothing particularly special about 115-volt 20-amp circuits. You do not have to have all outlets in the basement now 20-amp circuits. Absolutely not. In fact, like I say, they could install the regular panel with nothing but 15-amp circuits, and then you just swap out one of the 15s for a 20 if that's what you want at a particular group of outlets. That easy to do.
Yeah.
Should he do it though?
I don't think so. I mean, I would have to know more about what you're planning on buying as far as equipment gear and the size of the room and everything else. But
I mean, it's actually
the number of times we've actually run into people wanting or needing this has been 3 times over the course of this podcast.
Maybe, if that. I mean, actually genuinely needing it. Because I mean, even ATI or monoprice amplifiers that can use a 20 amp, amperage. They could make use of that to get to their maximum output. They still work just fine off of a regular 15 amp circuit. So, yeah, are you going to have a massive ATI or monoprice monolith amplifier? Okay, that's one thing. If you're not, it actually might be more beneficial to have them install more 15 amp breaker boxes versus fewer 20 amp ones, right? I would rather have fewer devices or fewer outlets and lights connected to each circuit as opposed to
what you really want is like isolation so that you don't get that 60 hertz hum,
That's right.
that we sometimes get. So more than anything, you want to make sure that when you turn your vacuum cleaner on, that nothing in the home theater is
like
going to hum.
The cool thing you could do is, if you're saying, I know where my theater area is going to be, instead of having all 6 outlets that are in this area connected to one breaker, as would be typical, say, can we have 3 of these outlets connected to one breaker and 3 outlets connected to a completely separate breaker? Regular 15 amp breakers, but could we do that?
So the plan is to use an equipment rack for all of his gear and to have that rack in the closet space under the stairs. Does he need to be concerned about heat? Again, without telling us what gear you're going to be using, I mean, you could be using all like Class D amps and not have an Xbox in there, and Xbox 360, and you would be fine. But yeah, you should be concerned about heat for sure. I mean, especially if that's going to be a small enclosed room, I would be concerned about heat. At the very least, I would put some sort of venting at the top of the door or top of the towards the top of the room.
It really should be a louvered door, a louvered closet door, so that would probably end up being your air intake. If I would look into having some kind of fan, not a noisy one, just one of those quiet fans that to expel the air somewhere near the top of that closet space. Because if the air can just be naturally drawn in through a louvered closet door, and then you have a fan blowing the hot air out, that should be. You just want the air to be able to circulate.
Right. And you can get quite enough fans to do that. I mean, just go to the computer fans, and you can look up
big
that. And
180 or 240 millimemer, PC fans.
Right, and you can literally plug it into the back of your receiver or whatever. Whenever the receiver turns on, it turns on the fans, and boom, because the receiver's always going to be on when everything else is there. So he owns a Harmony remote, but it's not one of the hub-based models, just IR. He was told a bunch of stuff about IR repeaters, IR blasters, receivers, emitters, but he found all that a bit confusing. With the gear in a rack under the stairs, he definitely won't have line of sight. So does he need a Harmony hub in a new Harmony model? Yes! Use our affiliate link to buy it.
We don't have such a thing. We're not here to make money, but it really is the easiest solution for you.
But you don't need it. You're right. You don't need it. But you will need to run some sort of wire. I don't even really know what it is. It's probably like, just regular Ethernet cable or something from where your home theater, where the IR you'll have to buy an IR receiver thing.
A little there's a little, essentially a little camera that's there to sense the IR commands where you are able to point it.
Right. So you will have to know where that is in your room. Put it someplace near the front, near the screen, so that when people who are not you will point in the general direction that it's supposed to be with the remote, and then that will send to the emitter and the blasters or whatever you have in that depends on the setup of the room. You could have just like a blaster that's on the I'm thinking the door. You open the door, it would be right there,
and I mean there are
blasting straight out
the wireless IR repeaters, which could theoretically do this job.
But we don't know where this closet is compared to, it's the closet in the room, is the closet at the top.
It's a closet under the stairs, so I'm thinking it is in the basement. It's just not line of sight.
You could have a 3-story house. It could be at the top.
True.
Top stairs. We don't know.
I don't think so, though. I suspect it's the stairs under the basement. This could be done, and it could be, let's be honest, done less than the price of buying a Harmony hub. So
it will cost you more in terms of setup and all that other stuff, because the Harmony hub
potentially headaches too.
Yeah,
I'm not the
Harmony hub
biggest fan of those.
Would be very easy.
But if you're saying, if this is an effort to convince someone else that it's worth spending the money on a Harmony hub, I mean, I will make the case. It is far easier if you were to just get a Harmony hub based remote. So easiness,
especially if these stairs are like, okay, so you're going to be using a projector. If these stairs are in the room, then the hub goes inside the closet. which will be just fine. And then you like snake a little blaster out underneath the door, or right, above the door or whatever, so they can control the whatever's in the room with you.
And it also lets you control the Harmony Hub from an app on your phone. So that's something your current remote definitely can't do. And if, let's say you're upstairs and you go, oh, you know what? I forgot to turn the TV off. Instead of having to go downstairs and pick up the physical remote, you can just do it from your smartphone. So that's a selling point.
More importantly, when your kids are in the home theater and they're watching something and you want to mess with them, you can do it from your phone and they'll never know. Dad, something's wrong with the TV. I don't know, man. I'm in here. What do you want me to do about it? Leave me alone. So he's planning to continue using a 1080p projector for now. Then he also wants a small flat panel mounted above his wet bar. He'd like to be able to have the same video playing on both if people are over to watch sports or whatnot. He'll be using a Marantz SR7013, which has 3 HDMI outputs, 2 mirrored and 1 zone 2. Does he need to make sure he gets a 1080p flat screen? It seems like even smaller TVs are all 4K these days. Will it cause a problem if he sends 1080p to his projector, but also has a flat panel if it's 4K? It won't be a problem for the projector. There'll be a problem. Well,
I mean, it's not a problem. Yes, if your sources are sending out 1080p, that's fine.
Yeah. So, okay, if you do this, your flat panel will get 1080p SDR.
Yeah.
All the time. It cannot get 4K HDR. It will not.
Right.
But do you care? Because I think the answer is you do not.
I mean,
which case,
if he's willing to go looking for a 1080p flat panel, obviously he doesn't care that the little flat panel is 4K HDR, right?
I wouldn't. I would get the 4K HDR flat panel so that later on when you are upgrading your projector, you're not
That's right.
I'm screwed. I've got this flat panel and now I can't get HDR on my
and
projector.
This could be, I mean, it sounds like it's a fairly unimportant display. He just wants it there so that it can be viewed. I mean, you grab a TCL S400 series, super inexpensive, but it's 4K, supports HDR, even supports Dolby Vision, which your projector won't, but that's neither here nor there. But I mean, it supports all the thing. And that way, if and when you do upgrade to a 4K HDR projector, everything will be fine. And for right now, you just have your sources all output 1080p, and the 4K TV will accept that completely fine. It'll take a 1080p signal, no problem. So that's the way to go.
Yeah. Tom, me, different Tom. 2 weeks ago, we talked about Tom's setup where he was using a B6 OLED, a Sony receiver that cannot pass through HDR, and the Ultra HD Blu-ray player with only 1 HDMI output, no Dolby Vision. We went through his options since he doesn't feel any desire to upgrade his sound system. Right now, he concluded that getting a new Ultra HD Blu-ray player that offers 2 HDMI outputs and Dolby Vision support is the best choice. So, which player? Is there a justifiable reason why some Ultra HD Blu-ray players cost $500 or more? Can you get an equal picture quality from a less expensive models? Well, they should all put out the exact same picture after this 4K.
Yeah, the difference being that Panasonic's higher end Ultra HD Blu-ray players offer the thing that they call their HDR optimizer, which is processing inside of the player that you know, if your content on the disc is, say, mastered at 4,000 nits, it can retone map that very well, retaining all of the detail into 1,000 nits or 500 nits or something like that, and send that onto your TV, which your TV will then still tone map what came out of the Panasonic, but it's working with a signal that it's more easily able to handle without clipping off any detail at the very top. So can you justify $500 for a player? Yeah, because the Panasonic can do all the HDR formats. I'm talking about the UB820 here. It can do all the HDR formats, including HDR10 Plus and Dolby Vision. It's one of the few players
that can... HLG? That's a real question.
I'm not sure about that. I don't think there's any HLG discs. But in any case, all the HDR formats supported by that Panasonic, and with this HDR optimizer, that is sort of a unique feature. Now, wouldn't it be lovely if you could get all that in a less expensive player? But unfortunately, first of all, Panasonic's less expensive players aren't available in the United States, but you could pop up to Canada and grab them. There was the UB420, which did almost everything the 820 does, but not Dolby Vision. All right, so that was the thing you were dropping in the 420. And
which
then
would be okay for you because
well, unless he wants to, I mean, he kind of wants to keep Dolby Vision. Yeah.
No, I'm thinking of the other guy.
Tom kind of wants to keep Dolby Vision. So the 420 dropped Dolby Vision, plus you can't get it in the States. And then there was the newer UB450, which has both HDR10 Plus and Dolby Vision, but it drops the HDR optimizer, which is kind of the thing you would want with a B6. So if you want it all, you could sort of justify, if price weren't a concern, the cost of the $500 UB820 from Panasonic. That's what you would be getting. You'd be getting the HDR optimizer and Dolby Vision support, and it actually handles it all properly. But what can you get for less? I would have to point you to one of the Sonys, which unfortunately, while they do support Dolby Vision, do it in the worst way possible, which is that you have to manually toggle it on and off, which is why it can't auto-detect it. I have no idea in this day and age, but you would have to do that. Now, that would be their X700, which is like $200 these days, or the X800 M2, which is like $250 these days.
It's very hard. It's very hard to justify buying anything but that Panasonic right now. I wish we had more options. I wish
that
the
it's
Oppo was still
$500,
around.
right? That's the problem.
know.
Yeah.
But $500 for a player. I mean, remember when Universal Disc players first came out?
Yeah.
I mean, like $1,000 was the cheapest one out there until Oppo showed up, and it was like, oh no, $450. What?
But I mean, if you're willing to manually toggle on and off Dolby Vision, which is insane, but if you're willing to do that, you won't get the HDR optimizer, so you're at the mercy of what your B6 does with all the HDR10 content. You can't re-tone map that inside the player, but the Sony's obviously less expensive, and they do handle all the things, and they play all the discs nicely, and you're like, $200 to $250, so I'd have to point you there.
All right. Damien continues to daydream about his future speaker upgrade for his basement theater, and he's using a spreadsheet to keep his thoughts organized. He wants to eventually upgrade from his Pioneer Andrew Jones speakers. He'd like to be able to use just his receiver to power the whole setup, but still be able to play loud. So efficiency is a consideration. I mean, how long? Do we know how far away he's sitting?
He's about 12 feet, and he has 2 rows. So
okay. As he continues research, he finds himself drawn to Diapolito designs. So he's mostly been looking at MTM speaker models, the RVH R515, the E's.
But both the regular impression and the impression elite.
Okay. HSU HC1 Mark II and the Sen CTM 340SC are all certainly on the spreadsheet. But he's also come across RBH SV661s. And the reference ones or the R ones, whatever they are, and the Power Sound Audio MTM 210s.
The Power Sound Audios. Woo!
Oh, there we go. Which are both above his critical budget, but he likes to daydream. So what are some other MTM models worth looking into, especially any with high sensitivity? Even if they're expensive, he just wants to research and possibly fantasize a bit as he continues to learn. Now, all this talk of fantasizing has got me feeling a little creeped out, but okay. I don't know why. Okay, so you like the MTM design. Fine. I know I got no problems with that per se, but there's nothing magical about the MTM design that makes it play super loud compared to other designs.
No.
I mean, if you're really worried about loud, I mean, anything with a horn in it should be on your list, which is Klipsch and
and HSU, which he has on his list.
HSU, which he has on there, yeah. Mm-hmm. So, I'm thinking, does it have to be MTM designs?
I know. I'm not sure. So, I mean, I do want to explain though, because not all MTM speakers are a Diapolito array.
That's true. So a Diapolito arrays, the top and the bottom are playing the same content.
Yeah, it has to be a two-way design with a specific crossover.
Yes, the tweeters in the middle and the top and the bottom are both mid ranges, basically. Yeah. Even if they're the only thing that's in there, they're just mid ranges, and they are both playing the same thing. There's lots of speakers that are out there that look like that.
Yeah.
And the tweeter is playing something. One woofer is crossed over into the tweeter, and the second woofer is crossed into the first woofer.
Yeah, like a 2.5 way design. Is, very common.
So don't just look at the speaker and say it's an MTM. It must be a Diapolito. No. Diapolito, whatever.
Yeah, and the whole point of the Diapolito array is that it actually uses the lobing created by having this mid-range and then a tweeter and then a mid-range in a vertical alignment to limit the dispersion of the tweeter in the vertical direction. It was all brought about because they're saying it's more difficult in most rooms to control the floor bounce and the ceiling bounce. So if we do that within the speaker itself, we can have this wide horizontal dispersion but narrow vertical dispersion. It gets rid of some room effects. Sometimes that's beneficial, but then people were stupid and went and turned it horizontal, and now you have tall vertical centers dispersion and not wide horizontal center speaker dispersion, and that's a terrible thing that the Diapolito array was never designed to do.
And if you look at the top end RBH designs for their incredibly expensive speakers. You'll see a tweeter, or back in the day, 4 or 5 tweeters, sort of all in one little location, and then woofers all the way around that to the side. And those are meant to basically control, floor and ceiling bounce plus wall bounce.
Yeah,
that was the idea.
A nested array. I mean, there were Vance Dickinson's designs with his nested array design.
Yep.
But again, I mean, so in the Dapolito array, in the Vance Dickinson nested array,
we are not going to help this man, by the way, because we're basically telling him he can't just look at a speaker and discount it right away. So basically, all the speakers are back. You were trying to limit.
I don't think he is trying to. I mean, he's trying to expand, because, I mean, honestly, if this were about choosing which speakers, he's got 3 excellent choices within his budget. And out of those, I would probably. The reason Tom and I keep coming back to RBH and Ascend is because we're very confident that they are so neutral and transparent to the signal that if you don't like how they sound, it's not the speaker's fault. That's why we easily recommend them. And then the HSU is a nice choice to have on there because it has the higher efficiency that sometimes you need, and at this price point it's not always easy to find, but HSU offers it. So if it's really about just finding, I'm like, you already have the 3 options that we're going to point you to. Bring them all in and audition them in your room by all means. So
the thing that I really like about RBH over most brands of speakers is their wide offerings and the uniformity throughout the offering. So one of the things I think he's maybe trying to do here is say, maybe when I'm ready to buy speakers, I'll actually have more money than I think I'll have.
Possibly.
And I want to have options for myself. I'm like, okay, well, RBH is your man. Just stick with that.
And I mean, we already know he likes SVS's Ultra Series, and that would be in here too. Absolutely, that would be in here too. If somebody said, I bought SVS Ultra Series speakers and I set them up properly and I didn't like how they sound, I'm like, well, either you don't like what you're listening to, and that's you've just never heard it accurately before, or there's something else wrong. I would be confident in that as well. But, they don't offer speakers that are in a Dapolito array, so maybe that's one way he's trying to talk himself out of it. But, I mean, those designs are specific. The spacing of the drivers has to be specific to be a true Dapolito or a Vance Dickinson nested array. The spacing is important. The crossover inside is important. Like, you'll look at Ascend's CMT 340 and you're like, well, they have one that just looks like they turned it horizontal and that's their center. But David Fabricant heavily modified the crossover in that speaker. It's no longer a Dapolito array in that horizontal version. It's got a different crossover inside. So, I mean, to answer directly, are there some others he could look at that are MTM? I mean, I could point you to like KEF, because they have some that look like they're MTM, but they're not.
They're not.
They're not. They're a concentric tweeter and mid-range driver in the middle, so already it's not a tweeter in the middle. And then the woofers to either side, sometimes they're 2-way, sometimes they're 2.5-way, sometimes one of them is a passive radiator and it's not a driver at all.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes that just looks like a woofer. Really, it's like a fake port.
But if you're looking for something that's pretty efficient, certainly an easy-to-drive speaker that would sound darn good, I have no problem recommending KEF. And if you just want the look, they have speakers that match that for you. So, I mean, that's an option that could certainly be on there. But honestly, I mean, by all means, you're daydreaming, you're learning, you're looking at stuff, and it's just fun to think about and ponder. But you have the top choices already, and if this is really about what am I going to buy, I think you're already kind of done.
I really, the thought experiment's fine when you're kind of doing this shopping, but getting out there and listening to stuff, I think is where you should be,
or
with
bringing
this.
them in for audition.
All right. The problem being, spending, once you start actually shopping, people tend to want to spend the money. So sitting behind the computer and just daydreaming about it allows you to
sure,
not have to put a credit card.
You can also end up going far afield, which is actually kind of what's going on with the next question there.
Yeah. So since he's looking for high sensitivity speakers, which I'm going to say you really don't need to be doing, but let's go on. He's come across Zoo Audio and Tecton. One of Zoo Audio's models says it uses a single 10-inch driver all the way up to 12 kilohertz, and then has a super tweeter.
That is a
driver.
beamy speaker. That is a straight line of treble coming at you.
12-inch driver is just doing work. I'm sorry, 12 it has a super tweeter that goes from 12 kilohertz to 25 kilohertz. It's rated at 97 dB sensitivity and a 12 ohm load. Then over at Tecton, not all of their models use their array of multiple tweeters. They have some pretty normal looking designs, but still with high efficiency. Do any of these deserve to be on a spreadsheet? Can we just say no and go on?
I mean, that's what I would like to tell you. So, I mean, here's the thing. You're looking at all the designs you're looking at, and honestly, like the Ascend CMT 340 speakers are pretty efficient and have exceedingly high power handling. And we know he's getting an Atmos receiver. All of the ones that can do 11 speakers like he wants to do have pre-outs. So if you discover that you actually genuinely need more amplifier power, there's nothing stopping you from adding an amplifier in the future. So I've no concerns about that. But on this high efficiency tip, I mean, all of these speakers that have normal dome tweeters, regardless of the material, aluminum, silk, whatever it is, they have pretty similar dispersion and efficiency. You don't see wildly different dome tweeters. So when you're asking for a speaker to be more highly efficient, it's going to be in a horn, or it's going to be a compression driver, or it's going to be something like what Tecton uses, which are ring radiator tweeters. And one thing that almost all of the higher efficiency tweeter designs have in common is that they are more directional. That is one way you get more of the sound to come at the microphone, is by directing it that way with a horn, or inside the throat of a compression driver, or a ring radiator tweeter that naturally beams its sound forward and not so much wide dispersion. So given that you're looking for a neutral and a wide seating area and a deep seating area and all of these things, I'm like, I don't want you to go nuts on this stuff.
Yeah, it's very hard. I mean, I think that in your mind you're looking at trying to limit your choices so it doesn't feel so overwhelming. Maybe. But you're only 13 feet. I know we said 12 feet, but you're only 13 feet away, and a lot like Rob says, adding an amplifier is not a huge deal. And I mean, it's also not a huge expense anymore. It used to be really crazy. And yes, you can go down the rabbit hole and get all nuts with it, but the reality is you'll probably be okay with just your receiver for most of the speakers that we're looking at. Even at your 13-foot distance. Again, I'm not trying to not limit you. I know that you want some limitations to make it a little bit easier for you to look up stuff, but sensitivity is not exactly, I think, as applicable or apropos as you.
You don't need those power sounds in your setup. My goodness.
The things I would be looking at would be flat frequency response, clean response from 20 kilohertz down to 70, 60 hertz. Making sure that you cover that range really well. You may look at the crossover, how the crossover interacts with subwoofers, as we talked about at the beginning with the THX stuff. Maybe that's something you might care about. Looks, sure. I think, honestly, before I would worry about whether or not it's a Doppolito array, or whether I would worry about if its efficiency was normal instead of super high, I would worry about how a speaker looks. I would put more value in that than I would put in those other two things. So, I mean, there are other things you could care about, but I think that you've seemed to have put a lot of weight on these two factors that I don't think deserve it.
At the moment, just me. That's all.
So up in his living room, he does plan to add some absorption panels wherever he can. We have, of course, suggested printed panels to him, but he already has one large painting that he would like to hang above his TV. It's on stretched canvas. Could he extend the back of the frame and put rock wool behind his painting to turn into absorption panel? Unless that painting is acoustically transparent, meaning you can blow air through it.
Yes. Yeah.
No, because it won't let the air through, which means that it doesn't turn into the only part of that panel that would be absorptive would be the sides.
That's right. Yeah. You don't want, I mean, if you put the painting up there and this canvas is not acoustically transparent, and I mean, if you try to blow through the painting, make sure it's not a part where that's important, because you don't want to accidentally damage it by blowing too hard with your mouth or something like that.
And don't do it when somebody else can see you, and put it on YouTube, because I totally would. Like, what's this dude doing French kissing this painting?
But assuming that the air that you blow just bounces right back into your own face, which is what I'm expecting it to do, that is just acting as a reflecting surface now. And yeah, you could have gaps on the side, but that's not really an effective absorption panel.
Yeah. So he'd like a recommendation for some fully wireless earphones. No cables or cords of any kind, what do we suggest? like Bluetooth? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
But,
I mean, the RBH ones are good.
But they're not fully wireless. They have a wire going between the two earphones.
Oh, you mean for each one?
He's talking about like like Apple AirPods, but them again? Good,
I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, if you want something that kind of resembles Apple AirPods but actually sounds decent, RHA's True Connects. They look almost exactly like Apple AirPods, but they're black instead of white, and they're a proper in-ear monitor design instead of leaking their sound out into the world.
I would expect them to be slightly bass heavy. That RHA generally does a boomier headphone.
But they go for $170, so not too bad there. But the ones I like right now for true wireless earbuds are from Audio-Technica. They've got a $100 pair, the CK3s. I would point you to the CKS5s, which go for $150, $150 or $50 more than the entry level, because the battery life is like 3 times longer, which I think is super worth it. Then they have their supposedly higher end CKR7s at $250, but the CKS5s from Audio-Technica, that's the ones to get.
All right, Adam has heard us say that the center speaker is the least important speaker and that it's worth getting really good front, left, and right speakers. But of course, that runs counter to most advice that's out there that says that the center speaker is the most important speaker and that you should probably spend more on the center than anything else. Those people are stupid. But let's go on. Why do dedicated speaker models even exist? Why is there this one speaker that is different from all other pairs of speakers? You can literally use the exact same model of speaker all around everywhere else, right? But for some reason, the center is a separate, different model. Why? He wants to start building his media room, and he'd like to use bookshelf speakers, but he was thinking he might use 3 identical bookshelf speakers at the front. Can he do that, or does he have to spend more to get a quality center? All right, let's take this twofold.
Okay.
Step 1, why do we say that it's the least important speaker? Because it is quite literally the only speaker that you can remove from your system, and your receiver will say, "That's cool. I can make a sound like it was there, and it's fine."
No
other speaker. No, you cannot take one surround away, and your receiver will be like, "No, don't worry, I got this." Even if you have 7.1, it will not try to make a phantom side surround if you take one of the side surrounds by using the front speaker and the back speaker. Yeah. It won't do it.
Nope.
You take the center channel out, it's like, I got you, bro. Use the 2 front speakers to make a phantom center channel. It's good to go. That's why I say I've been saying it for years. Mm-hmm. Yes, even Gene over at Audioholics does not agree with me. He's wrong. It's just categorically, objectively not true that the center speaker is the most important speaker. What they're saying when they say the center is the most important is that dialogue and much information that you're looking for out of a movie, not out of music, out of a movie, is anchored in the center speaker.
Absolutely.
The
center
true.
Channel, to be clear. It's anchored in the center channel. And if you are attaching a center speaker to play the center channel, yes, it's worth it being a good one.
Yes.
Because if you put a super terrible speaker playing the center channel, it means all your dialogue is going to sound crappy. So yeah, if you have a center speaker, make it a good one. I agree with that.
And this all comes back to home theaters and boxes.
Sure.
All these recommendations come back to buying a home theater in a box. People would say, I'm going to buy a home theater in a box. Which one should I buy? These are the 2 I'm looking at. Get this one. The center channel's bigger. The center channel has one more driver in it. Basically, it's like the center channel is the most important speaker in the system because all of the speakers suck. Therefore, get the one that looks like the center channel is the least suck. And that's pretty much where this advice comes from. But the reality is that you can have a phantom center with your receiver. Every receiver on the planet will do it. Every receiver on the planet has done it since pretty much they made receivers. Mm-hmm. So why is the center channel so different than every other speaker in your system? How come it's different? Because TVs are not acoustically transparent.
Right.
And you cannot see through speakers. If you could make an invisible speaker that you could put in front of your TV so that you could see through it and see the image on the screen, we would never have a different design for a center channel. The idea when we first came up with quadraphonic sound and then went to surround sound, that center channel was that you would have identical speakers all the way around.
Yeah. But if we go back to the transition from mono, we started with mono into stereo. Originally, they were supposed to be 3 identical speakers across the front. That was what was originally envisioned was 3 identical speakers. This was for music reproduction because they said if it's not just you, because the phantom center does depend on where you are sitting in relation to the front, left, and right speakers. If you are outside of the front, left, and right speakers, you're not going to get a good phantom center image right in the middle of it. The stereo imaging won't work. So originally they were like, what if you are listening with a bunch of people on a couch or in a sitting room and some people are far to the left and far to the right? If we have an actual speaker right in the middle, then sounds that are in the middle will always come from the middle. That's what was originally envisioned, but
and if you're in a music listening room that is for nothing but music, this would be perfect.
That's right.
It'd be easy. You would have 3 speakers up front, 1, 2, 3, right, all at ear level, no problem. And people could sit wherever they wanted in the room, and the vocals will always come from that point where the center channel is.
But we had the combination of the recording medium that was available at the time, which ended up being vinyl long play records that could only hold 2 channels of information, not 3. And there was experiments with matrixing in the center stuff and things like that. Even at way back then, they knew that was something that could be done. But ultimately, you ended up with 2 channels, and then we had TVs. And so what people started doing was, I mean, if you had a big tower speaker, there wasn't much you could do. And then, like we were just talking about with Dapolito arrays, you had these speakers, and they go, people went, well, what if I just turn that on its side? That's a more convenient form factor for putting above or below a television. And that just sort of ended up being the case. But then we figured out a little by little, like, oh, you can't just take a normally vertical speaker and turn it on its side and have it sound the same. Stuff changes. What do you know? And so little by little, we started having dedicated center speakers to try and counteract the problems that come from turning a regular speaker horizontally. That's where that
having
came
it
from.
not at ear level. That's the other real issue, is that in order to have something at ear level, it also has to be at eye level. So suddenly either your TV gets moved up, way up or way down, which doesn't make any sense, or you move your center channel lower or higher based on that. We've actually had people who have put 2 center channels, one at the top and one at the bottom of the screen, mostly because the speakers they were working with were garbage, but sometimes because they just, it had such a big screen, it seemed to help for them. So your question is, you just want to go with bookshelves all around. That's perfect. Yep. That's exactly what you should do. If it's possible to go bookshelf speakers at ear level, tweeter at ear level, or a little bit above for the surrounds, all the way around you, that's perfect.
Yeah, and if you're
just make sure you have a screen that you can put the speaker behind,
right,
and it's acoustically transparent, and it's got to be a projector and ... And
I mean, you could also have a regular bookshelf speaker below a TV, but tilted so that it's aiming at you. Yeah. But you would want to keep it vertical. You don't necessarily want to turn it horizontal unless it's one that offers a design where you can rotate the tweeter and have the same wide horizontal dispersion instead of limiting the horizontal dispersion when you turn the speaker horizontally.
Right.
But yeah, you can absolutely do those things, or you could go acoustically transparent screen. The other thing you could do is get something like a KEF bookshelf speaker that embeds the tweeter right in the middle of its mid-range driver, and now it doesn't matter which way you turn the cabinet, the dispersion remains the same. So that's another option. But absolutely, 3 identical speakers across the front was the original idea. It's just that TVs mess things up.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, I can't say this enough. I don't hate center channel speakers.
No.
I don't hate them. My point has always been that the center channel is the least important because you can basically get away with not having it.
That's right.
Yes, it's not optimal. Yes, your dial now where you sit will make a big difference of whether or not you have that phantom center or not. But the reality is, anybody sitting outside the left and right speaker, their sound's screwed anyway. So who cares whether or not they're getting the phantom center at that point? So, if we could go identical speakers all the way around, that is the gold standard.
Yep.
That's a gold standard. Andrew is in Canada, so he is tripping over Paradigm speakers up here. Must be tough. He snagged a pair of mini monitors for $40, even though he doesn't actually need them, because why not? And now he's just like flexing on us.
Yep.
In his current setup, he has a Denon S720W powering 5.2.2 configuration, the maximum that receiver can handle. And he's using a pair of Paradigm's ADP adaptive dipole surrounds, as well as a pair of bipole speakers that as his Atmos speakers on his ceiling. His ADP surround speakers are directly to his sides, but they are up high, only a foot below his 8-foot ceiling. He likes them a lot, though, and often gets the sense he has actual surround back speakers behind him, even though that's obviously just a phantom's effect. Since he has the extra pair of mini monitors on hand now, he's toying with the idea of expanding or changing a system, but he hates the idea of visible wires, so permanently adding another pair of speakers will mean a bit of drywall work, and he doesn't want to do that unless it's really worth it. So, would stepping up to the Denon X1500H allow him to expand his system to 4 Atmos speakers? If not, what would he have to get? 4 Atmos. He's got 5.2.2 right now, so
and that is where the X1500H also tops out.
Yeah, I was going to say that you had to go to 2000, right? The 2000.
Nah, you got to go to now. If you're careful, the brand new X3600H can do 4 overhead speakers. It can actually do 11 speakers. It can power 5.2.4 itself, and then you can add another 2 channels to it to do a full 7.2.4 with the 3600H. But if we're talking the 34 or the 3500H that we often recommend around here, grabbing them from Accessories for Less, that also is limited to 7 speakers total, 5.2.2. So normally, if you're shopping at Accessories for Less right now, because they don't have the brand newest models that end in a 600, you'd have to go to the 4000 series, the 4400 or the 4500 to do this within Denon's lineup.
So since he already has top fronts mounted on the ceiling, and then he has surround speakers mounted up way up high, would it make any sense to have all of those where they are, and then mount mini monitors either as top rears or front heights? I don't think you can do top fronts and front heights.
Well, I mean, you can relabel things. The relabeling isn't a problem. But no, I mean, if you already have top front speakers, you definitely wouldn't add front heights. That makes no sense.
No sense at all. Yeah.
You could, I suppose, put speakers on the ceiling a little ways behind you, call them top rears. You could do that, but you have these surround speakers already mounted directly to your sides way up high.
Right. They'd be right within range of each other.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm more tempted to do, if you want as little drywall work and rewiring as possible, is you relabel your current way up high surround speakers. You could call them top middles and call your current top fronts front heights. That would work. Or you could just call your current surround speakers that are way up high top rears and continue calling what your bipole speakers on the ceiling top fronts, and then add the new mini monitors as new surround speakers at ear level.
Yeah, you could I guess that makes the most sense.
Yeah, because your surround speakers are already way up there.
Right. Okay, so he can't put surround speakers directly to either side and closer to ear height, but he could put surround speakers a ways behind his seats. If he were to mount the mini monitors on his side walls, they'd end up about 125 degrees, maybe 2 feet above his ears. That seems pretty close to Dolby's current recommendations for 5 floor-level speakers. He knows we'll suggest just temporarily set things up this way, but he'd like to hear our input first as to whether this is even worth the time. He doesn't want to lose the enveloping sound he has with his elevated dipole speakers. So even the trial of using his mini monitors placed lower and farther back worth the time and effort? I would say yes.
Yes, I agree.
I am. Yeah,
although this means buying a new receiver, right? You can't do it with your current receiver. Well, I mean, you could try the 5.1 with your current receiver, right? You just, instead of hooking up your current way up high dipole surrounds, you just now connect them to your mini monitors. And I mean, what you described there, a ways behind you, 125 degrees is fine. I mean, they say 120 degrees in a 5.1, so that's close enough. A little bit elevated we like, because it gives you a clear line of sight. So the placement is fine. We do recommend using regular monopole speakers for your surrounds these days with Atmos. So I mean, I think this is worth the experiment, right?
I would do it, and I mean, I would just try it with the current receiver. Just unhook your current surrounds and hook these in instead. Yeah. You just throw the wires across the floor and put these things on a stand or something like that.
Purely temporary trial right now.
And then, I mean, the other speakers that are way up high, if you could set those to bipole,
or you know what, the current surrounds that you have way up high directly to your sides, try unhooking your top front speakers, connect those wires to what used to be your way up high surrounds, and just label them as top middles and see how that sounds to you, because that'll tell you whether you're okay with leaving your existing surrounds way up there and using them as Atmos channels. If that doesn't work for you, then you'll know you have to move your current surround speakers in some way. Yeah, that's worth it.
Ted on Twitter. Ted has a C8 OLED. It can do frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping on HDR10, and it can do Dolby Vision. He's got a Sony X800 Ultra HD Blu-ray player that does not support Dolby Vision. Does he need to worry? No. I mean, no.
So on the C8, with the dynamic tone mapping that it has, you feed it an HDR10 signal, and it will do a darn good job of retaining all the detail, right? You're sending in a 4,000 or a 10,000 nit master. It does a remarkably good job of looking at each frame and keeping all the detail. You're not losing any detail. Will it look literally identical to a Dolby Vision version, right? You take a Dolby Vision disc, right. You feed the Dolby Vision signal into your C8, and then you compare it directly side by side with another C8 that is getting the HDR10 version of that very same movie and doing its own dynamic tone mapping. Will it look literally identical? No, but it's remarkably close. The dynamic tone mapping will actually probably look brighter than the Dolby Vision version in a lot of scenes, which tends to be more pleasing. And the important thing that I care about is that all the detail is there, and it is. So I certainly wouldn't worry about it. I mean, if you just got to have the Dolby Vision look, then obviously nothing else will do. But it does a darn good job of that dynamic tone mapping. Do not worry, Ted.
Yeah, I'm fine with it. Bastian from Germany. Bastian was pretty happy with this 2.0 setup, and he started listening to this podcast. We ruined everything for him. Sorry, buddy. But then he decided to add a subwoofer, which ended up being an SBS PC2000 cylinder. Now he wants to add a center speaker.
That's right.
So he sits off center. He sits just outside the left speaker, basically, because he's got a small entertainment center. The TV sits there. The speakers sit on top of it as well, and he sits on he's got the L-shaped couch sort of thing, but one of the things has a big long, you can lie down on it. All right. He's using Focal Aria 906 bookshelf speakers and a Denon X2500H. He likes the looks and sound quality of his Focals. So do we have any objection with him sticking with the Focal Aria series and getting the matching CC900 center? No.
That's what you should do, in fact.
That's what I would do.
Yes.
I mean, I would get the one that matches the speakers I currently have. So
most definitely.
The only time I would not say that's the case is when it's a known issue with their center channel being Garbo, but that's rarely the case. So he sits a little over 9 feet from the TV, and his favorite seat is actually over to the left a bit. At the moment, his front, left, and right speakers are only 5.5 feet apart. Should he rearrange some furniture so that his front, left, and right can be further apart? Yes.
Yeah. If you work out the angles right now, you are pretty narrow with them only 5.5 feet apart. Now, if you are 9 feet from the TV, Dolby would have your front, left, and right speakers at a minimum 22.5 degrees to your left, or at least left of dead center, and the right speaker 22.5 degrees to the right of dead center, which would put them in your case 3.8 feet, or since he's doing everything in centimeters, that'd be 116 centimeters to the left and to the right of dead center. So the speakers themselves would be 232 centimeters apart, which is definitely more than your current 5.5 feet, which is 180 centimeters, something like that. Yeah.
So what I'm going to suggest is you take those. He's got these boxes that he's got plants on. That one's sitting just to the right of his entertainment center, and one's to the left but behind. Yeah. Pushed back because he kind of blocks off this back area where there's a whatever. So take that box, put those boxes on either side of your entertainment area, put the speakers on the boxes and the plants on the where the speakers used to be.
Oh yeah. And I mean, since he mentioned himself possibly rearranging some furniture, I think that's exactly what he has in mind.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, whatever. The Focal CC900 center is rear-ported and about 200 centimeters tall. He doesn't think he'd...
20. Wow, that's a tall center. Wow. 200 centimeters tall.
Is that 12 feet? No, 6 feet. Oh, 6 feet tall. Woo. Power sound audio makes it, and it goes down to 8 hertz. 20 centimeters tall. He doesn't think he'd like the looks if he put the center on top of his TV stand. Plus, he would have to raise his TV 20 centimeters somehow, and he doesn't think he wants to do that either. Instead, he's thinking he could just remove the middle doors of his TV stand and have the center within the shelves below and tilt the center upwards, but he would have to modify the middle shelf too, since the total interior space is 39 centimeters high and the existing shelf smack dab in the middle height-wise. He was further thinking he could just construct a frame with acoustically transparent fabric to replace the middle door so that the center speaker is completely hidden. What do we think? I think that if that shelf is not load bearing, because some of these things, especially when they come from IKEA or whatever, everything's so precariously connected together that if you take it out, suddenly the structural integrity of the entire thing is compromised. As long as that's not the case, this sounds like a good idea. Just make a custom shelf down there, or just take that shelf out completely. Build something up from the bottom, even if you're just, stacking up books or cinder blocks or whatever.
Yeah, because if it's all going to be visually hidden, who cares? Yeah.
Put a frame over it with acoustically transparent white, because everything in this thing is white.
What he had in mind.
White fabric. I think that'd be a perfect solution, and just get rid of those doors.
And should he put some insulation within the cabinet cavity, since this is a rear-ported speaker?
Well, there's holes in the back already.
There are.
And I mean, there's no reason you can't cut a bigger one. So, I mean, and then again, once again, you're putting fabric over the front, put fabric over the back.
That's true.
Because people can look in through the windows and see this stuff. If you want it to look okay, just do that exact same thing and put fabric over the back and cut a bigger hole. Just make sure you're not, structurally making this thing unsound.
Now, all of that said, I'm a bigger fan of doing what you said you didn't want to do, which is putting the center speaker on top of your TV stand. First of all, it gets the tweeter closer to ear level, but also, there's a lot of work to change this nice-looking TV stand. I would absolutely put your center speaker on top of the TV stand, and then, since your TV wouldn't be tall enough with its regular built-in legs, they have these universal TV mounts that fix onto the Visa mounting brackets on the back.
Right.
It's like a little teeny tiny tabletop TV mount thing that you can raise to the appropriate height and have your center speaker nicely below your TV. It looks slick when you put it all together that way. It doesn't look out of place. I think it looks nicer. It saves you having to modify what you already own. That's what I would have you do. But yeah, either way.
Yeah. So we've talked about the importance of the first microphone position when using any audio setup program. Since he sits over to the left and he's the only one who really cares about the audio quality, should his primary seat be the microphone position number one? No.
Nope.
Wherever wherever your phantom center channel would be created by your front left and right speakers, that's where it should be.
Yep.
That's where it should be.
Now, what you could do is all the subsequent measurements after measurement number one, you could lean towards the left so that the spatial averaging is favoring what's happening a little to the left of position number one, as opposed to equally weighting all around position number one. I'm okay with that. If you want to, nudge the spatial average over to what's happening towards that left seat. But position number one should be right in between your front left and right speakers, where the center would be.
So what's the difference between the Odyssey Multi-EQ XT and Multi-EQ XT32? His Denon X2500 has XT. What is he missing? What would XT32 give him? Well, generally speaking, when you go up versions of Odyssey, you're getting finer controls.
More filters.
Yeah. And then the XT32, especially if it has the sub EQ HT, does more in the bass, or in some cases with the older Odysseys, does something in the bass.
Yeah, going from 2 EQ just to EQ, that was a big deal. Yeah, 2 EQ did not touch the bass whatsoever. That was not great.
So more filters. You get just more granular measurements and controls and stuff.
Yeah, XT has, I think, something north of 1,000 filters. That's across the whole frequency range. Right. And then XT32 has into the tens of thousands of filters. So it's just a matter of each filter can be narrower, and particularly at high frequencies. If you're going to EQ high frequencies, that's a difficult thing to do. So each filter can be very much narrower, be almost like a notch filter if you want it to be. But that's about all. Is it really super audible? That's tough to say.
Well, let's read his next question first before we answer this, because it'll inform this.
Yes, correct.
So his room is wide open and mostly hard, flat surfaces. It echoes. There's 14 feet of space on his left, and he's thinking acoustic panels on the right wall would be a good idea, right?
Yes.
Yes, it is. And he also plans to put a rug between the TV and the couch. He's got about 10 feet open behind him. So would we still say he should put absorption anywhere to the left or behind him? You should put absorption everywhere that you can.
Anywhere you can, yes.
And hard, reflective, echoey rooms and room correction are not mates made in heaven.
Yeah.
So what would XT32 give you in your room? Likely very little.
Agreed.
As far as what it can do, because especially if you're gonna start moving those measurements over to one side, and who knows what that's going to do. If the measurements don't line up, if your room isn't already well treated in not maybe well treated, but it isn't already acoustically in a fairly okay spot, there's only so much Odyssey is willing to do, because everything it does makes something else worse.
Right. Yeah, so in terms of importance of placement of panels, yes, the right side wall, so that the decay times coming off the right side are a little bit more similar to what's happened to your open left side.
Yeah, so basically the left side, the first reflection point is behind you someplace in another room.
Well, it's still on the side, but it's way over there.
Right, it's way, we don't know where it is. So the other one, your speaker's basically going to be, especially if you move the speaker out wider, it's going to be right there on that wall. So that first reflection point is going to be very close, and it's going to be coming right at you. You're going to want to put an absorption panel there. You want to deaden that wall as much as you can.
But then
that is not the end of it.
Yeah,
though.
then
That's
we're saying
step 1 of 20.
Absorption basically anywhere you can. That's not about spot treatment. That's not about first reflections. That's just about getting rid of the echo you say you can hear in this place.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's absorption literally anywhere. You stuff it in corners, you stuff it above, that little gap above your cabinets in your kitchen, absorption up there. Anything you can to knock down the echo in this room.
Buying a lot of speaker fabric and just covering stuff up. All right, Ryan. Ryan is finishing his basement, installing a home theater. The front portion. Oh man, what am I reading today?
I don't know. Sometimes I mistype, but that one's okay.
These words are not on this page. They're just in my head. The front portion of the room is 12 and a half and 18 feet long. So it's 12 and a half wide, 18 feet long. And then it narrows at the back by about 3 feet and extends another 18 feet.
So I guess you could kind of call it L-shaped. Yeah, 36 feet long in total, narrow at the back. But he's kind of using this front portion, which is 18 feet in this front portion. That'll be what he considers his theater. But it is going to be open at the back to another 18 feet going back there, but narrow behind him.
Oh, so there's a stairway behind him.
That's right. Yeah, the stairway is what's narrowing things behind him.
When you say narrow, it's not narrowing on both sides. It's narrowing on one side.
Correct.
By 3 or something feet more, whatever, because of the stairway.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. At the moment, the ceiling is down with fully exposed ceiling joists. Okay. He'd like to sit 12 and a half feet from a projection screen with the projector mounted on the ceiling just behind his seats. When he goes into the theater, he likes to sit 3 rows behind the very middle, so he doesn't want to feel as though he's sitting too close and give himself fatigue or sore neck. That is too close for me. You've already sat too close, but whatever. So he was thinking 120-inch screen size, but would we recommend 135 instead?
I mean, going by the angle, so if you are in fact going to be 12 and a half feet from eyes to screen, I mean, the angles are just what they are. That's the math. The 120-inch screen will give you a 38.4 degree field of view, which is quite nice. That's bigger than pretty much any HD TV you've been looking at. But the 135-inch screen size from 12 and a half feet away would give you a 42.8 degree field of view, which is what I would go for.
How big are these screens from on the bottom, though? What's the measurements on the bottom, the horizontal measurement? Because this is 12 and a half foot wide room.
Well, that's just a 135-inch screen is 10 feet wide.
So that only leaves you a foot on either side.
That's
not even that. If you consider the bezel, not even that. If you're going to put that on the wall.
That's right, which means your front, left, right speakers are basically stuffed into the corners now.
Yeah. So at this point, I start thinking that 120-inch screen makes a lot more sense.
It does.
If we move it forward and we make it acoustically transparent.
Oh, even more so.
We put the speakers behind the screen. This does not have to be a false wall, whatever.
Although it could be,
screen.
Because I mean he's doing construction in here, and probably, I mean, a lot of what he's saying is trying to keep the price down a bit. So honestly, if you go to a motorized acoustically transparent screen, that ups the cost of the screen. So
I like just taking it. I mean, if you really want to keep the cost down, acoustically transparent, fixed frame, hang it from the ceiling on whatever you want to hang it from.
Just some stick framing, and you make yourself a little false wall. It doesn't have to cost much at all for some basic stick framing. Or you could just move your seats closer. That is also another option if it's not big enough at 120 inches. It's pretty easy solution to just nudge your seats a little bit closer. Because if you go for the 120-inch screen, now you have sufficient space to the left and the right of the screen that your front left right speakers can be outside of the edges of your screen. And a 120-inch screen is not so tall that a regular center speaker below that screen and tilted up would be any sort of problem. So you could keep the price real low by just going for a standard silver ticket white screen on the wall, speakers to the left and right, center below it, 120 inches. And if you sit 12 and a half feet away and go, I'd like this screen to be a little bit bigger, you move your seat forward.
Yeah, scoot your seats forward. So don't mount your surrounds until you figure out where you want to sit.
And you can do that in a chair. It doesn't even have to be your couch. Just a regular old kitchen chair will let you know if the screen's big enough or not.
Yeah. That dog is upside down. What's the best projector for under $2,000 these days? Well, I mean, can you do 2,500? Because it's the Epson 5050, I think.
The Epson 5050 for about, so you can certainly get it for 2,700. You can probably find it for 2,500 if you really shop around. Yeah, if you can nudge your budget up, the 5050 UB gives you all the things. Excellent black levels, full HDR support, and 4K 60 with HDR if you're worrying about gaming. Because, so the best projector under $2,000 these days, I would point you to Epson's Home Cinema 4010, which is very similar to the 5050 UB, except it doesn't have the ultra black, so the black levels aren't quite as good, and it cannot support 4K 60 with HDR. It can do 4K 30 with HDR, or it can do 4K 60 but without HDR. But if you're a gamer and you want 4K 60 with HDR, the Epson 4010 cannot do that. But otherwise, it's the best projector under $2,000. Now, at $1,500, there is BenQ's HT3550. It's a DLP projector, 1080p panel that it wobbles 4 times to give you the 4K resolution. Actually does have wide color, which is really rare for DLP projectors. Does support HDR. Can do 4K 60 with HDR, but unfortunately, it has kind of not the greatest latency. It's got a little bit of lag, so it's also not a fantastic gaming choice, unfortunately. So there you go. Those are the 3 options. Either pay a bit more for what you truly want with an Epson 5050 UB, or sacrifice 4K 60.
So he plans to soundproof the ceiling with, first of all, you're not soundproofing it, but let's go on. He plans to soundproof the ceiling with double drywall and green glue. He definitely doesn't want to ever have to cut through a ceiling in the future to run new cables. So what should he run for his 25-foot long HDMI connection to his projector? He's got plans to run the 120-volt electrical outlet and 2 Cat6 cables, but should he run a fiber optic cable? Anything else? We've only said that about a gajillion times on this podcast, but you should run conduit.
You should run conduit. Absolutely, you should run conduit.
And then just put a string in it so that you can pull
and if you really want to save yourself a headache, you run a conduit that is big enough that you can pull an HDMI cable through it. That's right. That will super duper help you. And you're talking about ceiling joists, so putting a larger hole through those is not a problem. You have the depth of the joists to drill a larger hole to pull a fatter conduit through it. Absolutely, you want conduit. Now, you could probably leave things with just the 2 Cat6 cables, but then you have to put HD base T balance on either end, which are more expensive than an HDMI cable.
Just buying the cable itself.
So there's that. Now, a 25-foot long HDMI cable should be, there's no reason you have to go fiber optic for that.
Yeah.
You absolutely don't. But if and when you end up with a projector that can actually use an HDMI 2.1 connection, now that's an 8K projector or a projector that does 4K 120, so that's probably years away at this point, but you're like, I never want to pull this ceiling down. Conduit. Because there are no HDMI cables at 25 feet long right now that you can buy that will actually work with HDMI 2.1. I know there are some fiber optic ones that claim they can do 48 gigabits per second, but we don't know if the chips inside of those will continue to work when true HDMI 2.1 is actually here, or whatever comes after that. So conduit. Then on top of that, you said you're running your 120 volt line up there. Make that not a 120 volt line that connects back to your electric panel. Make it a 120 volt line, like regular 14.2 Romex, that goes to a male electrical inlet that is positioned wherever your equipment and your battery backup are going to be.
Right.
Because then you can just
use it. If not, you have to you're basically plugging it into the ceiling.
That's right.
And if you want to put a battery backup so that you can cool down your projector if you lose power, you have to attach it to your ceiling.
That's right. No, what we're talking about is essentially a in-wall, in-ceiling extension cord.
Right.
So you have a regular female outlet up on your ceiling, regular 14.2 Romex, but that runs back to a male inlet that you position wherever the rest of your gear and your battery backup is going to be. And then it's just a regular short extension cord that goes from your battery backup to that male inlet. And now you have plugged your projector into your battery backup that lives with the rest of your equipment. That's what we're talking about doing.
So he's bought big rolls of Guardian R30 insulation that fits perfectly in the joist bays in his ceiling. It's soft, fluffy fiberglass insulation, but his contractor suggested returning it and getting rock wool insulation instead, but that's much more expensive. So what do we think? Well, you're already doing the green glue in the two. First of all, you said soundproofing. You can put 1,000 layers of drywall and green glue. The sound is like water. You pour water in the cup, no matter how well you seal the top of the cup, if there's a hole at the bottom, the water is going to get out.
Sure.
Okay. That's the way sound is in a room. I don't care how many layers of green glue, you're not soundproofing your downstairs from your upstairs. There is still stairs. The sound doesn't go, oh, well, the ceiling's got green glue on it, so I'm screwed.
No, I mean, he does have some kind of door here. I don't know if these, I mean, it looks like he's done drywall patching. I'm like, your side wall drywall is already up before your ceiling? Because that's backwards. You always want to drywall your ceiling before you drywall your walls, because the side wall drywall should actually be kind of holding up the edges of your ceiling drywall. So I'm not sure exactly what's going on there. Don't want to put too many worries into his head. But I mean, I'm not opposed to the double drywall on your ceiling. I'm not opposed to that because it does help. It help.
Doesn't hurt.
But
I just don't want you to think that you're going to do this and now suddenly you're not going to be able to
blast things downstairs at night and nobody upstairs.
That's not the way it's going to work.
But I'm certainly not opposed to the 2 layers with the green glue. But I mean, the insulation you have for your ceiling is fine. What it is,
I think so too.
What it is in a ceiling, it might not be as easy to work with as rock wool. Rock wool is super easy to work with because it doesn't sag. It holds its shape. You know, friction fitted into the joist bays and it just stays there. You don't have to worry about, whereas the really floppy fiberglass stuff that you have might fall out of the
It probably
joist
has
bay.
a higher R rating as well, which means it absorbs more sound.
Possibly.
But at that point, I don't think you're really worrying about that.
But what you can do is just literally string webbing in across that ceiling to hold up the fluffy stuff until the drywall goes up there, if that's the concern.
I mean, if that's your concern, just don't put the freaking insulation up until right before the drywall guys get there. Then put it up there, and then the drywall guys put the drywall, and you're done.
Yep. I do not agree with the contractor saying you should return it and pay way more.
Yeah. His ceiling soundproofing plan is the R30 insulation and 2 layers of drywall, a 5/8 inch drywall with green glue in between. Does that sound all right? Sounds fine.
Yep, that's fine.
It's just not soundproof.
Even higher end than that would be sound clips and hat channels to decouple it from there. But I mean, you don't want to lose the ceiling height in here. That makes sense. It is a far more labor-intensive installation to do that. And as Tom points out, you probably have other paths where the sound is going anyway. So, your plan sounds fine, in short.
He wants to have Atmos speakers, and he's thinking in ceilings. How should they be positioned? Well, it depends on where your seat is.
Yes, but, so figure out exactly where that seat's going to go first. 5 feet in front of you, 5 feet behind you.
That's top front, top rears.
Top fronts and top rears. As far as how far apart, I mean, essentially just to the outsides of your couch. Your front left to right speakers in this setup might be a little bit farther apart than usual. Yeah. So 1.5 to 2 feet off your side walls, which should be just to the outside of your couch as far as how far apart they are side to side.
Dan asked, do any Yamaha receivers other than the flagship allow you to use 4 overhead speakers? They do. They just don't allow you to do, 11 speakers or whatever. You can't have surround backs.
You can go down to the 2000 series, like the current one would be the RXA 2080, which would...
You got 5.2.4, but you can't have 7.2.4.
That's right.
Until you get... That's the one that the flagship can do that none of the rest of them do.
Yeah, so in Yamaha's lineup, when they say it's a 7.2 receiver, it's a 7.2 receiver. When they say it's a 9.2 receiver, it's a 9.2 receiver. It can't be expanded to do any more. So so can you do 4 overhead speakers with something other than the flagships? Yes, but with the caveat that if you do with the 2000 series, you are limited to 5 floor-level speakers, not 7.
Rob, not you, Rob, different Rob.
Rob.
So, you know those car audio guys who vibrate an entire city block as they drive by blasting their bass? How loud is that anyway? Would Rob's PC4000 even potentially do that to his condo neighbors? Well, there's a big difference between what's going on in the car and around the car than what's going on in a condo. So if you're in a condo, there's still like layers of walls and concrete and everything else that you have to get through. If somebody's driving down the street blasting their car and you're in the car next to them, physically there's not a whole lot between you and them. You know, a little bit of air, a little bit of sheet metal, and whatever slight bit of deadening they put in that car to try to reduce the noise. And it's not that hard to get, a ton of woofers into these cars that make basically one note the entire time.
Sure.
So could Rob do this to his neighbors with his BC4000? Yeah, you could do it. I mean,
I don't know about that, because when you look at the monster bass car audio guys, they talk about 150 decibels like it's table stakes. All right, that's what you're trying to hit with these car audio guys, is 150 decibels in the bass, which is stupid. You're gonna hurt yourself, but that's what they're after. So that's the type of sound pressure level we're talking about, is like 150. So they're probably not driving around. That's for like the bass competitions.
Well, the bass competitions, they have to have, not only is their car, super modified to make this thing happen, but they have to like take out all the glass and put in plexiglass. Absolutely. They have to do all sorts of modifications to these cars because they mount, and you don't sit in there while it's happening. They put a microphone in there and everybody stands well far away with hearing protection.
What is the point? But but as far as what they're driving around, it can easily be in excess of 120 dB while they're driving around. Yeah. Probably in the 130 to 140 range is what you're dealing with the crazy guys who are, causing a ruckus. So could your PC4000 do that? Nah, not really. It's not getting to those types of output levels.
But it's also not designed to. So
and nobody wants it to. Well, he's actually saying I don't even want there to be a chance that it could, and you're pretty safe. You're not hitting that type of level.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, he's worried about his neighbors. So.
Oh, yeah. Well, you would never turn it up that high.
No,
I mean,
that's crazy.
Even if you could, pretend that you had all that subwooferage in there. There would be. You would never calibrate it to that.
That's right.
When you ran your auto calibration, it would turn down all the volumes until you were at.
That's right.
You would not hit, even at reference level would be reference level, which would be the same reference level as everybody else. So he's house shopping at the moment. He's super excited about finally having a house without shared walls and his neighbors. But I mean, not and with his neighbors. He doesn't want the shared walls. I don't know how he feels about his neighbors. But how far away should any neighboring house be if he wants to be able to crank his home theater close to full reference volume at any time, day or night? It's less about how close the house is and more about where their bedroom is located in reference to your home theater.
I mean, it is an inverse square law. Every little bit of extra distance helps because sound pressure
loses a lot of energy.
Loses a ton of energy as distance increases. So in a very general rule of thumb, the more distance, the better. There's that.
So my neighbors, my home theater is all the way to the side of one of my houses. Not one of my houses, in my house, the rooms in my house. So it is all the way on the side, on the garage side, on the same. Back of the house, garage side.
Okay.
Back of the house, opposite of the garage side, is where my bedroom is. Reference level will get my wife up to come bother me, to tell me to turn it down, or close to reference volume. We'll do that. I watched Men in Black the other day, and I had it up. It was not very loud. It was probably negative on a. If I want it to be loud in here for a movie, I usually have that -10, -5.
Okay.
That's me trying to blast it. It was probably -20, -17 in here, so it's about 10 dB lower than I would normally watch. And my wife didn't bother her at all. My neighbors, I've asked them multiple times. I'm like, have you ever heard any sounds at night of me, whatever, watching TV? They're like, no, I've never noticed it. Their house, I'm on their garage side, and I know that their kitchen is behind their garage, and all the bedrooms are on the opposite end of the house.
And do you have any inkling of how far apart your houses are, like the closest walls to each other?
They're probably 6 feet away from each other, 7 feet away
so you're
from each
quite,
other. They're
quite
pretty close.
Okay.
We're quite
And
close. I mean, a lot closer than I would want to be. Well, maybe let's make it 12 feet.
Okay.
Let's make it 12 feet.
But I mean, you do have to consider your exterior walls are probably a bit better soundproof than your interior walls. In most cases, that's the case. So you probably wouldn't. Ideally, if you're playing full reference volume and your theater room is the wall closest to their bedroom, you put your theater room, right, and you've got one little narrow lane that's only 4 feet wide, they're probably going to hear that.
Yes.
But I think if you got about 12 feet or more, you're pretty safe.
It hasn't been an issue.
Yeah.
It hasn't been an issue. Plus, with everything else that goes on in the neighborhood, as far as ACs going on and off and stuff like that.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of stuff out there. So he's in South Florida, and a number of the houses he's looking at only have about 10 yards in between. 10 yards.
Yeah, it's 30 feet
in between them.
Yeah.
Are there any other factors to consider besides just the distance between houses? He wants to be able to enjoy his explosions and game noises without the bass bothering his neighbors. Now,
don't open your windows while you're doing it late at night.
And I have. Yeah. I've had my windows open late at night, and I've had it not. When I do, I definitely turn it down.
Right.
But I've never had a complaint. But my neighbors are not the type of people who can complain, because they throw 3-day long parties at New Year's and stuff like that. So, and they're out there all night and whatever. And I never complain. I don't really care what they do. It doesn't bother me.
But also,
I sleep through it.
Decouple your subwoofers so that they are not in direct contact with the structure of your building. Which you have a cylinder sub which already came with the isolation feet, so you're good on that front.
Right. And I guess, when you talk about neighbors, it's like there's people who are going to complain no matter what,
Well,
and
sure.
you cannot.
Yeah, if you've got the neighbor who calls the cop on New Year's Eve at 11:30 because people are making too much noise, then nothing's going to satisfy that.
It gets way worse than that down here. They got people who are like, your cats are too loud.
Actually, a good point outside of all home theater stuff. When you are house shopping, shop your neighbors. I would way rather buy a slightly crappier house with awesome neighbors than a super awesome house with crappy neighbors. Because this is a big purchase in your life, and you can fix up a house. You can't do much to fix your neighbors.
And there's no guarantee that even trying to shop your neighbors is going to help you at all either. They come off like Mr. and Mrs. Super Cool, but
still, it's something that a lot of people put zero consideration in, and a nightmare neighbor can make your life a living hell, and it ain't worth it.
Yeah. Last one here, Carl. Gene from Monolith and Matt Pose. I said I saw Pete Rose. It says Matt Pose.
Yep.
Tommy needs more caffeine and at least some food. All right. Matt Pose posted a discussion on YouTube about setting up dual or quad or more subwoofers as mono or separate stereo left-right. Matt discussed some of the research and experimentation done by advocates for stereo bass, but ultimately concluded for himself that while differences could sometimes be heard, it was inconsistent, and he personally agrees more often with Sean Olive's take, which is that if you set up multiple subwoofers to deliver uniform, even bass, when they're all playing together, that gets disrupted if there happens to be a bass sound that is only in the left channel or only in the right channel, and you use separate stereo subs. He goes on to explain that there are ways to maintain uniform, even bass response while still having separate left and right bass signals, but it's a lot more complicated to set up and integrate. So Carl knows our stance on the subject is pretty clear. We'd like to hear our thoughts on the ideas that Matt discussed and proposed, and why are certain folks still so invested in the concept of stereo bass overall. Have you ever met somebody who does not like to admit they're wrong? That's why. I am not that person. I have been wrong on this podcast many times. That's why people are like, I want to go back and listen to the first couple. No.
Well, for pure posterity and entertainment.
A lot of that stuff. I mean, this research didn't exist back then. It did not exist. We were still thinking, placing your subs in next to your front speakers was the best place to put them. We thought that. Everybody thought it. Wasn't just me. And but subwoofer crawls and stuff like that. We would crawl for subs, and then if you got 2 subs, you put the first sub where the best place was. You put the second sub where the second best place was. That's what we thought. So why are people still invested in the concept of stereo bass overall? Because they don't believe it.
Yeah,
they don't believe that bass is one unified signal, no matter how many drivers are playing it in how many locations throughout your room. They don't believe it. It doesn't make sense to them that a tweeter on one side of the room sounds different than a tweeter on a different side of the room. But when you put two 15-inch drivers in two different parts of the room, that is the same sound, making the same sound.
And very often people will point to, as evidence of stereo bass being a desirable thing, they will point to the examples of a stereo music recording that clearly has something like a double bass, or an organ or some instrument like that playing very, very low, deep bass notes. And they have set up their system either no subwoofers at all, right? Just two full range speakers, which is very popular, or they set up two large speakers, but also two subwoofers, but of course put the two subwoofers directly beside or directly beneath their two speakers and set it all up as stereo. And they will say, with that setup, I listened to this deep organ recording or bassoon or double bass or whatever it is, and I can tell that it's positioned to the left of my room, or I can tell that it's positioned to the right of my room.
Which would still be the case if you had set up your subwoofers properly, because the things that you're hearing are the harmonics. That's what's coming out of that left speaker. That's cueing your brain into that's where it's coming from. The deep, deep, deep stuff is still omnidirectional.
Now, something that I liked that Matt pointed out is that, so he's normally, along with Gene, they both said this, typically they both in favor of using multiple subwoofers. No qualms there. Absolutely, Tom and I say, yes, more multiple subwoofers. Typically, you set them up in mono. Also, we agree with that. But Matt, I like that Matt is completely open to experimenting. Let's read the research. Let's experiment with this. Let's go through it. Absolutely, that is the right approach. No problem with that. And he's saying, okay, I set things up according to some of the stereo bass advocates, and he could perceive he's listening to one recording set up normally with mono bass signal going to multiple subs, and then I've got sub in each corner, and I set up the two that are on the left hand side, front corner and back corner of my left hand side, as my left subwoofer channel, and the two on the right hand side as my right subwoofer channel. And as this recording plays, it does sound different than when I played it with a mono bass signal, but when he measures it, that's because the modal pattern in the room is now different, because now the sound is only coming from two subs on the left-hand side of the room versus even the same sound coming now only from the right-hand side of the room. What reaches his seat, if you measure it, is a different wave pattern than if all four subs are playing in mono. So can you perceive a difference having switched from mono sub signal to stereo sub signal? Yes, you can. Does that make some people believe, well, stereo subs must be superior then because I can hear a difference? The sound seems to change location. That is a false conclusion. Because what has changed is the modal pattern in your room. You're now you're mistaking uneven roller coaster bass for stereo bass, and that's not what it is. But yes, you can hear a difference. That makes sense.
Well, and just because something's different doesn't make it better.
Right.
I mean, that's sort of the thing. And or in the same case, we've had this discussion before when we have somebody go from a speaker that is flat to a speaker that is not flat, or a speaker that is not flat to a speaker that's flat, and they say, this speaker sounds different, therefore I don't like it, or this speaker sounds different, therefore I think it's better. It must be somehow better. This is the case here. We're making false equivalencies. There are, just because you are hearing a difference doesn't mean that difference indicates the quality being somewhat better or somewhat worse. You have to discern that afterwards. You're like, can I hear a difference? Yes. Now, do I like that difference, or is that difference better? That's the next question that people don't ask. They're like, I play them in stereo and it sounds different than when I don't play stereo. Right. Yeah, okay. Well, it's because that properly placing your subs fixed your 50 hertz suck out, and now you
don't hear it anymore. You don't notice that it's different anymore in the left versus the right.
Yeah, the left side now suddenly the 50 hertz suck out is back, and yes, okay, it sounds different, but it's because suddenly everything around 50 hertz is gone.
Yeah, no, I mean, what they were talking about with the very complex setup is you actually don't have any like subwoofer output signal. You in fact set all of your channels, all of your speaker channels to large, but then you feed all of that information into some, processor like a mini DSP, and in this case a multi-channel mini DSP, and then you retain that, yes, the left surround speaker is its own unique signal that only, plays full range. So if there happens to be a bass sound in that one channel by itself, there's no other channel. We're not spreading that sound around, but then you manipulate how just the bass of that one channel gets played through multiple subwoofers so that you still retain uniform, even bass. It is a much more complex setup so that, yes, each channel in the recording is completely separate and unique. Nothing has been summed together. There is no bass management happening inside of your AV receiver or pre-pro, but you are still ultimately using external processing to retain uniform bass response. Needlessly complicated in almost every setup, but I mean, again, I like...
Not only needlessly complicated, but it's. I think that end conclusion is sort of pointless when we can just use bass management, cut all that stuff off, since we can't tell where it's coming from anyways. Throw it all in the subwoofers.
But it's because
and Bob's your uncle.
Going back to Tom's initial response, there are a large group of people. So I mean, first of all, there are people who are coming to this kind of new, and I have zero blame for anyone who's saying, well, this sound was recorded in this channel, so shouldn't the speaker playing that channel play that sound? And or if my speaker can't reach that low, shouldn't I have a subwoofer right there to play that sound? That's where the sound is recorded. I don't blame anyone for making that logical thought process, because it totally makes sense on the face of it.
Why do you think we spent so much time trying to set up our subwoofers this way? Because it's what we have. It's called face validity. On its face, it makes sense.
Intuitively, it makes all the sense in the world. If I have 5 different places that a sound can come from, and I put this bass sound into one of those places, isn't that where I should play it back from? Of course that makes intuitive sense, but we are in rooms. And Matt explained that too. Matt did a good job of explaining we are in rooms where we are never hearing a straight line sound that went from that location to our ear. It is always reflected around our room a number of times. So I have zero problem with someone saying this idea is out there. There are people who are devoting research to it and writing papers about it or putting opinions out there, and I want to experiment for myself and see what the results are. And can I do what they're proposing? Can I hear? That's great. I love that kind of experimentation. That's exactly what I want people to do. But at the end of it, I think our conclusions are exceedingly similar.
So my passion about this and to some, maybe my desire to dismiss this argument so readily comes from not me thinking that that's not something that we should look into or not something that people should do. My problem comes in when people who have not done the research, who have not really looked at this thing too closely, start dismissing other people as being wrong for wanting to use bass management. You want to use 2 subs next to your speakers, and you want to run them full range in stereo configuration, and you've looked at the research, you've read the arguments, you've tried it the other ways, but in your room, in your situation, this sounds best to you. I'm all for that. You get on a forum and you say, if you're not doing it this way, you're doing it wrong, and you need to be burned at the stake. That's where I draw the line. And I would just as readily fight on the other side as well. Somebody came on here on this podcast and said, anybody who sets it up in stereo, running stereo full range subs at the front of the room is an idiot and needs to be burned at the stake. I'd say no, because we've had people on this podcast like, I've tried moving my subs around. They still sound the best up at the front of the room. I mean, I don't see it, you got lucky. I think is usually what we say. You got extremely lucky that it happened to work out that way, and that's great. Leave them where they sound the best.
Well, as Gene did,
that's all I care.
As Gene did a good job of pointing out in the video, sometimes people are saying, I got 2 subs, I put them both at the front of the room, but what they actually did is put them just to the left and just to the right of their center speaker, right? They're in between their centers and front, left, right, and they're saying, I've got 2 subs, I have multiple subs, and I run them in stereo, and it sounds good. He's like, but what you actually have is 1 sub in the middle of the front of your wall. because the sound waves are so long
center.
at that. Well, it's not even that. The sound waves are so long at that point that they are essentially co-located, even though visually they're on either side of your center speaker. As far as the sound waves are concerned, they're coming from the same spot. And
you've got one big sub up there, basically.
As Sean Olive pointed out in his Harman research, if you only have one sub, the center of your front wall is probably the best place to put it. So when people say, this worked out for me, I'm like, yeah, that also makes sense. Although you're not realizing what you really have is one sub in the middle of your front wall.
All right, we got to end this thing, dude. I'm
do.
Starving.
So we have on our list, let's see, that was, who were we just talking to there? Carl?
I don't know. I scrolled up.
So did I. Janan, Sean W., Mark H., Nathan D., Ben F., that's the one I filled in there. Okay, so, and then Kevin A., Carl C., Alan S., and Alan spelled differently, G. Those are the folks whose questions I've received. In fact, I think I got a couple more, but they came in after the Sunday, so they went into the other email folder for next week.
If you want to get your question answered on this podcast, all you have to do is ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. We do answer all questions.
Yes, we do.
In order.
First
usually.
in, first out for the vast majority.
Yeah. Sometimes we will combine them if they are similar to other questions, but generally speaking, first in, first out. So email us at question@avrant.com. We want to thank our listeners of the week, David, who went to www.avrant.com and clicked on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link and left us a PayPal donation, and to our 86 patrons over at patreon.com.
That's right, David. Thank you so much for that PayPal donation, and patreon.com/AVRant Podcast if you would like to sign up as an automatic monthly donation.
For AV Rant, I'm Tom Andry.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.